I would like to introduce you to two servant leaders. These two individuals were the first introduction to me while I didn't have the term servant leaders or transformational leaders anywhere in my vocabulary, anywhere in my mind. In hindsight and retrospect, I now know that these two individuals, James and Bertha Hardy, my dear sweet parents, were examples of servant leaders. Wonderful individuals, both no longer with us, but they set a path for me that I didn't even know. So, these individuals were farmers right here in Greenville. They raised eight children. 4 boys and 4 girls. They needed some labor for the farm, right? So they raised these beautiful children and had the ability back in the day to make sure that those 8 kids had access and could and did attend post-secondary education. I call them servant leaders because my father, neither one actually got formal education. They got to high school but never finished, and then of course go to college. But I often tell people that if my father had had the opportunity to do so, he would have been an extremely dangerous man, because he was a very intelligent, just raw, natural intelligence. When things went wrong in the community, and back in the day, the two groups of people in the community were black folk and white folk. When there was something going wrong, my father was the one that people would go to. He and my mother had this thing, what we called the community garden, where people in the community could go into this garden, and he had 2 rules. 1, get only what you need. Make sure you leave some for others. And the second one, keep the garden clean. Right? Now, we had the things that you would expect on a farm. We had tobacco, corn, cucumbers. We had pigs. We had hogs. We had chickens. We had mules, dogs and cats. We didn't have a lot of cats. Mommy didn't like cats, so you didn't have a lot of cats at our house. And there's a lot you can do with a hog, y'all. Did you know that? Eastern North Carolina people probably know that, right? There's a lot you can use a pig for, and my daddy used it for all of that and then some, right? But these individuals, to me, were good examples of servant leadership, and they helped to transform a community and a church, individuals, and even our family. Now, transformational leadership is this phenomena out there, right? It has names and it has definitions and it has characteristics and all of that. In essence, when an individual is going to go through some transformational leadership, first of all, I think one needs to be very much self-aware, right? If you don't know who you are as a person, then helping others or leading others or even trying to get into this thing of changing an organization or an environment won't happen. You have to be able to bring your authentic self to that organization to be able to have some impact. Now, to be able to do that, that means you've got to dig deep. Dig. And you got to know yourself and do some self-reflection and introspection. And when you do that, if you're like me, you find that there's some things you like and there's some things you really don't like, right? My husband and I would have that conversation where he would tell me things he didn't like about me, and I'd tell him things I didn't like about him, right? And some things I said, you know what, sweetie, I'm gonna work on this one and this one and this one. But this one over here, I'm gonna keep it. And you just got to learn to love it, right? And if you don't love it, just accept it, because that's me, right? But I know myself extremely well. I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, I know my pet peeves, I know what makes me tick, and I'm comfortable with myself. It took me a while to get there, but I'm very comfortable with Virginia Dare Hardy. Not everybody is, but that's okay. I am, which entails, because I am, then that allows me to have a little bit more sensitivity and emotional intelligence when talking to and listening to others. So, from a leadership perspective, I try to be in tune to other folk and see what's bothering them, pay attention to their verbals, but more importantly, to their nonverbals. Because nonverbals speak louder than your verbals. So emotional intelligence says to pay attention to other people. Transformational leaders do some of that. Now, these are 3 books I really like. Ron Heifetz, Leadership Without Easy Answers. Good to Great, Jim Collins. Those 2 you may have heard, at least the Good to Great. And the other one is The Power of Nice, right? By Linda Koval and Robin Thaler. I may have the names switch. These ladies wrote a book, Foreword by Jay Leno, if that tells you anything. But they wrote this book through the eyes of women and talking about how do women use what's stereotypically considered to be a strength of women, which is being nice, being friendly, being kind. How do you use that as a strength? Because in essence, to be a good leader, to be a strong, effective leader, doesn't mean you have to be mean and nasty, right? You can be nice and still be a leader. And so that's what that book is talking about. But Ron Heifetz says, does something in his book that talks about the difference between leader and leadership. He says that a leader is a person who gives direction and helps to direct when the direction is known. Leadership, on the other hand, is being involved, being engaged when their situation is difficult, when it is challenging, and you don't quite know how you're going to get from point A to point B. So leaders, there are a lot of leaders, but do those leaders have effective leadership? Have transformational leadership? Because the 2 things are extremely different. Now, when I came into, I've been in this university for 24 years. I was 12, if you're trying to guess how old I am. Just about to turn 13 when I started. I'm a young pup. And so, but in this role, I've been here for 7, 8 years, give or take. So when I got in this role, one of the things that I recognized was that what I inherited was a wounded organization. Wounded because they had been going through a lot of transitions with leaders and with all types of different things and people with personalities. And so they were wounded. There was not a lot of trust internally or externally. There was not a lot of team building, playing well in the sandbox. And there was not a lot of trust or credibility. So when I got here, I had to end up doing a very deep dive. Dive into what was happening and why it was happening. We needed to get an understanding and an exploration of what people were seeing. Because if we were going to transform the organization, we needed to know what people thought the organization was at the moment, where are we right now, how did we get here, and how do we move forward. So what I ended up doing was actually going around and talking to everybody. I did internally and talking to my direct reports and their units. I went to the unit meetings, asked questions. I went to all of the deans and all of the vice chancellors. I only had about 5 questions that I asked everybody, the same questions. Now I may have had some follow-ups based on their responses, but basically asked them the same 5 questions. Now all I did was take notes. I took tons of notes. I did not respond to a lot. Now I'm a counselor by training, so I'm used to sitting quietly. I can outwait you in silence now, right? Because that's what we do. But what I didn't do was make promises, because I didn't want to make a promise that I couldn't keep. Because if I had made a promise and didn't keep it, even if the reason for not keeping it was legitimate and valid, I would have already cut my legs out from under me, because the trust wouldn't have been there. Right? So all I did was listen. Now understand, when you go talk to folks and ask them questions about your area and your organization, people were free. They were happy to tell you tell me all the bad and all the ugly. I got lots of notes if you want to see them. Pulling out the good took some effort. Can you tell me what is actually working? How is it working? What is it that you want? If you could create this thing, what would it look like? Right? So we did a lot of deep diving and trying to pull out information from folks. Once I got all that information, I then brought that information back to my team. Now understand, I've got to build a team. I've got to build this team because these people don't know me and I don't know them. And what they had experienced before wasn't always positive. So I'm coming in already behind the 8 ball. So I've got to get them to trust me. And as Shakespeare has said, methinks thou dost protest too much. If I've got to tell people that I'm A, B, C, D, I think something's wrong. Why? Because if I have to tell you I'm nice and tell you you can trust me, then I'm not living it. So my actions, my behaviors need to tell people that and need to be genuine. And then the trust will come. And so we were able to build that team. Now I did it based upon 3 I's. I tried to live my life and lead by these 3 I's. Integrity speaks for itself, right? Say what you mean what you say, do what you say you're gonna do. It's about the trust, being ethical, being honest, right? If I don't know, I'm gonna tell you I don't know. Not afraid to admit what I don't know. The other one piece is about being inclusive. I'm big on saying to folks, asking the question, still to this day, whose voice is missing from the table? Because you want to make sure you have the right people, the right voices at the table. Now that may sometimes mean, as a leader, that the person at the table is somebody whose voice you really don't want to hear. Right? Because they're going to push, they're going to ask you hard questions, right? But those are the people you want there. Because if the only people at the table are the people who look like you, think like you, act like you, come from the same similar background as you, then it makes for a very, very, very kind of boring situation. And you have no creativity. I never want yes people around me. I want people who are going to push the envelope and make me think, because that means we're going to get a good product or make a good decision at the end. Right? And the other piece is about intentionality. Be intentional. I'm very deliberate, very intentional about the decisions and the actions that must be made. I don't believe that decisions have to be made right now. It's a rarity that a decision has to be made immediately. Hence, be intentional about bringing the right people to the table to have the conversations, to talk it through so that you make a better decision. Now, I had to decide in that aspect of, was I going to tear the house down? Was I going to break it all up and just start over? Or was I going to repair? I opted to repair because there was a lot of good and a very strong foundation that we could build from. Now, in building that, as Ron Heifetz would say, Jim Collins would say, you've got to get the right people on the bus, right? And not only get them on the bus, the right people, you got to get them sitting in the right seats. So they got to use their skill sets to their strengths, to their advantage. Now, we tend to forget the second part of Jim Collins' quote. He says you have to get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats. But he also said you got to get the wrong people off the bus, right? Which means that somehow those people who don't fit, got to go. Now, I was fortunate in that some people we had to let go, but most people realized that they were not fitting in with this transformation. And so those individuals decided to take themselves off the bus. And taking people off the bus is never easy, but is necessary. Now, this transformational and leadership thing, or leadership in general, has, I think, 2 roles. Right? One is being on the balcony. Sometimes you have to be on the balcony, and while you're there, you're watching. You are observing what's going on. You're trying to get the perspective of everybody that's there. Who's doing what? How are they behaving? Trying to get a feel for what's happening and what people are thinking, how they're doing, what are their strengths. You then, as you observe these people and observe what's happening. And then at some point, you're going to get on the dance floor. And when you get on this dance floor, there are going to be times when you're dancing, you're swaying, right? And sometimes you're going to lead this dance, right? You got it. You got it, right? So over the winter break, I wanted to learn how to salsa. Later on, I'm going to show you how to do it. Right? I wanted to learn how to salsa. So this man was teaching me to salsa, and he was talking to me, and I was like, okay, I got it. And obviously I didn't have it because he stopped. And he put his hands on my hips, and yes, I have hips. Thank you, right? And he said, stop trying to lead. I got this. Let me lead, and you follow me, and we'll be all right. And I literally had to take a breath and exhale and get my mind right. And once I did, I followed, and that's how I learned how to salsa. Okay? I got it now. So leaders, you have to be on the balcony, and sometimes you have to be on that dance floor, and you have to lead, and you have to follow. Right? So this transformation thing requires you as a leader, if you're going to have effective leadership, it requires that you know yourself, that you are tuned into other people, that you build strong teams, that you build trust, build relationships, that you are paying attention, that you have integrity, intentionality, inclusivity, and that you check your assumptions, right? We all have them. We have these assumptions about people, and those assumptions can get in our way when we interact with people as leaders. We all have biases. We all have prejudices. We all know this. People may not like it, but we have them. But we need to check those assumptions. Right? People say to me all the time, when I see you, Virginia, I don't see a black woman. And then my question to them is, well, who the heck do you see? Right? I'm a woman. I am black. See me that way. It's okay. These are part of my identity. It's not the whole identity, but it's a major part of my identity. Now, if you treat me differently because I am a black woman, then we got issues. But if you see me as such, cool beans, because you need to know who I am. So you got to know people, get to know people as you develop this leadership concept. Now, these are the wonderful 8 children of James and Bertha Hardy. This was at my wedding in 2009, right? As you can see in the wedding dress. Now, I have this up here because my father was the leader of this family. He was the leader of this organization, and he did run a tight ship, right? But there are 2 things that he said. There are many things that resonate with me, but 2 I want to share with you today. 1, he would tell us, don't worry until you see me worry. Which, as a leader, is saying, I got this. I'm going to take care of us. I need you to be a part of it, but I've got this, and I've got your back, and you can trust this. And then the second thing, which goes along with it, was he started these things called family conferences. And so no matter where we were, if there were an issue in the family, if one of us had a problem, he'd make the phone calls and everybody come home to have this conversation. Because according to him, if one of us was in trouble or not doing well, all of us were in trouble and not doing well. And that team concept, that family, and that we're here and we take care of each other and we're in tune to each other, resonates completely with this whole notion of transformational leadership. Margaret Mead said a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, but something to the effect of a small group of individuals can change the world. And in actuality, that's the only way it can change. The only way you can have transformation and use your leadership is to bring the team together, to transform whatever organization or situation that you're in. Transformational leadership. Let's lead and transform to new horizons. Thank you.